Okay, so today Matt and I saw a movie called The Ipcress File. It's a movie from 1965, the same year as Thunderball, and it's based on a spy series of novels by, let's see, what does it say here? What's the name?
Len Dayton.
Len Dayton, who created the character of Harry Palmer, who's kind of a character that continued on into numerous stories. So the Ipcress File is the first of these stories, and it's a spy story that has a lot of crossover with the Bond series. It has the same producer, Harry Saltzman, and it has a lot of other carryovers. It has a score by John Barry, editing by Peter Hunt, and production design by Ken Adams, who did all those crazy sets in the early Bond movies. So if you're wondering why we are subjecting our viewers to a movie that I'm sure no one has heard of, or anyone who's watching our videos, that is, it's because we picked this at random, and it just so happens it has a lot of crossover with the Bond series. Matt, what is the Ipcress File about, according to Gene Shalit?
Undercover gang kidnaps and brainwashes key scientists. London's Secret Service swarms and stumbles into action. It's time to call in that master spy, Harry Palmer. He'd rather be preparing fine food in his own kitchen, but he plunges into action to cook the gang's goose. An aura of deception, menace, and mystery, director Sidney J. Fury's camera sweeps and swoops, exposing the byways and slyways of spyways. Fury's best film shot Kane to stardom as the devilish 007-ish agent. Dashing excitement, dashes of humor surge through this thriller based on Len Dayton's bestseller. It all proves that when it's time to crack a case, Kane is able.
And Michael Caine's in it, yes. I mean, this is one of Michael Caine's early movies, so it's like you can kind of tell he's a little bit green. I don't know if you got that from the movie, but it looks like he was kind of, just kind of getting started, But I mean, he had been acting for a while, but mostly in bit parts. So, Matt, what did you think of the Ipcress File?
I enjoyed it. It's sort of a genre spy movie.
Okay.
Very, very slowly paced. A lot of long shots. A lot of they try to go for suspense rather than action. Even in scenes where people are fighting, you're like, the camera is very far away and obscured, and they're constantly the camera is constantly being obscured by various things in sort of an artsy way, and it's just sort of a lot of long still shots or just panning, following a character. It just, it's a spy movie, but it takes its time.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll say for the most part, I found it a decent movie as well. I would say I enjoyed the second half more than the first half because I saw that there was kind of a payoff to all the buildup. During the first half, it seemed like the plot was kind of meandering a lot, and it was kind of, I couldn't really get a hold of, okay, this follows this follows this. It felt like, okay, we're going here now, and we're going somewhere else. It's like, first we're going to follow this guy named Grant B. He was, I guess you could say, the villain of the movie, but then we lose him. Then, okay, now we're going to do some other segue, Michael Caine's going to have dinner with that Courtney woman,
Right.
And it's like, it seems like it's more like a real, like, if I was to compare this to James Bond, it's almost like a realistic way a spy's life would be.
Right. It starts out. Part of the reason why it's really slow is it kind of starts out like you're in the life of a British spy.
Right.
He's in England spying on potential. He's sort of counter spying on potential spies in London, and he starts out just looking basically through a telescope at people and recording notes of it. Yeah, very realistic in that way.
Oh yeah, I mean there was one part that stuck out to me. It was like Harry Palmer is telling, I guess, his boss at the time, what's his name, Dalby. Yeah, he tells Dalby, "Oh, tomorrow's Saturday. I get it off." It's like that's not the kind of thing you'd hear James Bond tell M. It's like, "Oh, I'm going off to somewhere, and I'm just going to take today off. I'm not going to do any spying. That's not the kind of thing you'd get from a James Bond movie, where it's constantly, okay, this leads to this leads to this. Whereas with this case, it's like, okay, I did something with the plot. Now I get to go home for the weekend. That kind of thing. That really stood out to me. But
It's also more realistic in that the characters don't seem to be in on the plot at all.
yeah,
Like there's one part where Harry Palmer,
okay,
he thinks that he's been betrayed by the bad guy. The bad guy's just trying to send him on a wild goose chase by giving him a fake phone number.
yes,
right?
yes.
And then you don't like, oh no, he lost the bad guy, and the boss is mad at him for losing the bad guy. But it's the way that they find the bad guy again is they figures out that the paper that he'd written the phone number on was a clue, like a hint, like go to this place that I wrote
at
on the
this
paper.
time. Yeah,
And that's what the real message was, but he just didn't get that. And then they figure that out later, and that's how they continue the chase the bad guy. Like he missed an important. It's not very cinematic. It just sort of
I missed this. Well, yeah, that part was very interesting for me because it wasn't even Harry who figures this out. It was his boss.
Right.
Well, like I said, the whole first part, I was wondering, okay, where's all this going? There's this whole subplot with Harry's former boss, Colonel Ross, who's kind of the big guy in charge of their organization, and then it's like he suspects Dalby, the other boss, of maybe wrongdoings or something, and that ends up paying off in the end. But I don't know, it was very interesting. I think, but I was happy when we got to the second half when all of the build-up paid off. The main plot is that this gang or this group are kidnapping scientists and erasing their ability to be scientists somehow by hypnotizing them in a certain way. An interesting movie.
Sure.
Yeah. But I am glad with the second half where it really paid off, and the second half consists of Harry Palmer being kidnapped by this gang, and then he had already discovered what Ipcress was, what it was for, and then okay, now they're going to try to employ that on him, but since he read the file, he kind of knows how to resist it by inflicting pain on himself. He prevents them from hypnotizing them. Like he holds a bent nail in his hand and just grasp it really tightly in order to prevent the psychological trauma or whatever they're trying to do, the hypnosis. Anything that stood out to you, Matt? Anything from the movie?
I thought the direction was really interesting. Like I said,
yeah.
Sometimes it gets a little weird where you have a shot of somebody talking to somebody else, and they're sort of having in a conversational style, and all of a sudden it will just cut to where the camera is like right here relative to where my face is looking up at them.
Yeah.
And you're kind of like, all right, we were way back viewing this conversation. All of a sudden I'm like looking directly up at this person.
Yeah. Or there were cases where there's two people having a conversation and be right over someone's shoulder, and like you were saying, a lot of things obstructing your view. So it'd be like the screen would be 80% shoulder, and then the other 20% would just be maybe a little bit of the other person talking to them.
Well, sometimes they'll use that in a clever way. Like when he goes into the room to do the briefing, you see all the backs of the heads of the other agents sitting in the chairs, and then obscuring the screen is like a little kind of tan thing. And I was thinking to myself, is that someone's shoulder? Like, is that going to be the female lead? Is that why? And then it turns out it is.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's kind of neat how they sort of play around with that.
Oh, neat reveals. I liked how they used that with Dalby at the end, where you see Dalby is on the phone with Palmer, who had just escaped the torture, but he's he's sitting next to another person, and it's blocked by this huge lamp, which is taking up a huge amount of the screen. But then out of nowhere, there's Grampy. Oh,
right, but you don't think it's weird that it's taking up a huge amount of
the
screen because so many shots in the movie are that way.
So you wouldn't think, oh, there isn't anything here. It's just another.
There's a great shot where so like the whole couple times in the beginning of the movie, the bosses tell him to close the door. Because I guess even though he's a spy, he keeps forgetting to close the door. I don't know if it's supposed to be a joke or something. But then, like at the end, he's got one of his bosses at gunpoint. He's like, he tells them, him close the door, and you're seeing it from outside the door, and it swings toward you, and then it doesn't close. It passes being closed and opens slightly so that you can see the boss's face. So it's like a really clever shot.
Yeah.
They just had someone there, like, waiting under the camera to grab the door. It's like the exact.
Yeah.
That's neat.
Well, now this is interesting because this is very, very interesting direction, but this is directed by Sidney J. Furie, and you probably don't know who this person is, and there's a reason. He directed Superman 4, The Quest for Peace, which is widely considered one of the worst, maybe one of the worst movies ever. And it's like, oh, that's interesting. I mean, I didn't. Maybe he would have given us the art house version of Superman, but I think that was probably Superman Returns. But but there was one criticism of that film which I noticed was kind of in the Ipcress file where I don't know, it's kind of a lighting thing where someone's shadow would be huge on the wall because of the placement of the light. It's like, oh wow, what happened there?
Yeah, there are parts in this movie where so much of the screen is just pure blackness that you cannot tell what's going on. I think a lot of it's intentional.
Yeah.
But it is a little odd. Just so you know, you hear someone fumbling around, it's just complete darkness.
Yeah. Well, see, this is one of those films, in terms of whether maybe an audience today would enjoy this, I hesitate to say that it would be. You know, it's very, very. I think it's one of those movies that would have a very niche audience. You know, and
I think the pacing is not quick enough. Because this came out, you said, right near Thunderball.
Yes,
and if you look at like this versus Thunderball as spy movies. You know, Thunderball is a lot snappier.
Oh yeah,
right? It was a different time back then. Slow down and take your time making a movie.
Well, I think part of that might have been too that it was adapted from a book, and it's entirely possible that the writers just probably took scene by scene from the book. You know, I mean, there are cases where, you know, a book adaptation would, you know, it's great as a book, but if you adapt it directly onto screen, it would kind of, I don't know, the pacing would seem off. It wouldn't seem like a normal movie. I don't know. This might have happened with the Ipcress file. I don't know for sure.
Yeah, it's hard to say, having not read any of the books that this is based on.
Yeah, that's true. But there were a lot of things that kind of made me think that, where it's just, Harry's coming into his apartment, he's messing with I don't know, with his groceries or something, and pretty much the whole scene is just him messing with his groceries and putting it kind of in specific places or anything and stuff like that.
Yeah, the intro is all that.
Yeah.
It's kind of strange because the intro gives you a real impression that he's extremely meticulous, like almost OCD.
Yeah.
But then they try to paint a picture immediately afterward like he's just this insubordinate, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
you're off the case.
Yeah, that kind of character. Yeah,
which is weird because I guess it must be a British thing because it's so understated that it's hard to even tell he's being insubordinate. Like he says, you know, the tone of voice is snarky, or he says he's too late saying something or not standing up straight enough or whatever.
Oh yeah, it's very subtle. That was one of the first things I noticed. It's like, because reading up on this movie beforehand, I was just like, oh, he's like this clever goofball character. It's like watching the movie. It's like, oh, well, he has a couple of sarcastic quips at the beginning. It's like, oh, well, I'll miss taking orders from you, sir. You know, that kind of thing. It's like, oh, okay, that's what they mean by the sarcasm. Very, very understated. It's there though. I mean, if you have an eye for subtlety, you know, subtlety in the way it's written, not so much in the performance, then that's kind of what you would get from this movie. What do you think in general of the character of Harry Palmer, though? Just like, do you think they presented him better one way or another, or did you even really get a big impression of him?
It's strange. Like I said, it might be because of the book adaptation, but there are so many details of his character in the movie that none of them have time to really get fleshed out. Like, they mention that he likes classical music and Mozart, and then they have kind of a scene that integrates the spy stuff with the music, and like he doesn't like the military marching band's version of Mozart, but like that kind of doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah,
It doesn't affect any other aspect.
Yeah, another aspect of his character that I noticed is like he's kind of supposed to be a ladies' man, but even that's very understated. Where you get little shots and so forth, where he's just kind of ogling the woman. And
right.
Yeah, this really is kind of the flip side of a James Bond, where you just he's going to bet all these women that he's looking at, or he's going to go up to them and let his charm just do the work. And whereas with this one, it's like you mostly see him ogling the woman, and then with the character Courtney, there you kind of see a little bit of.
That was weird, the whole Courtney thing, right? I mean,
yeah,
what happened to Courtney?
Yeah, her character.
There's no resolution for Courtney.
Yeah, her character was supposed to be like spying for his original boss, Colonel Ross. The last scene of her in the film, she's saying goodbye to Harry because he needs to go undercover because he's being framed for a couple murders. One of them's of an American agent, one of them's of a British agent, and he did kill an American agent earlier in the movie. He's staying at Courtney's place, and then as he leaves, he says, "All right, I better make the train or whatever. I'm gonna get out of town because everyone's blaming me for this, or I'm gonna get in trouble for this." And then she immediately goes to the phone and she calls Colonel Ross.
Right.
And then right after, Harry gets kidnapped. He gets abducted. So it's like, oh, but she never shows up in the movie again.
Yeah. They want to keep you guessing because it's one of his bosses has betrayed him.
Yeah, I would say maybe the scope of the movie is really, really small. It's just kind of we're going to kidnap these scientists. We're going to brainwash them, make them useless.
Yeah,
but why though?
Right, like they mention what the scientist does, the main scientist that you actually see this happen to, but they never explain what it is or why we should care.
Yeah,
it's something to do with protons and energy.
Yeah,
I remember someone said that at one point, but it's not as like they're like, oh, this is incredibly important to our military operations.
Yeah, it's nothing like that. It was just kind of, oh well, all the British scientists.
I mean, I assume it's important.
Yeah, well, see, my guess is that it's like a Cold War thing where the enemies of the Allies just want to weaken them by kidnapping the scientists, but I don't know. They don't say that in the movie, so.
Seems like it'd be easier to just kill the scientists.
Yeah, you'd think so.
Why is sending back a dumb scientist better than just shooting?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's like what's the point of?
I mean, I guess you could argue maybe we'll get away with it because it's not as high a security priority to stop the people who are killing scientists as it is the ones that are kidnapping them and just sending them back.
Yeah,
But then they found out immediately that he had been brainwashed.
Yeah, and
it didn't take very long.
Well, see, what I was wondering is well, if Grantby is the one who's kidnapping these scientists, why don't you, at the trade, why don't you just arrest Grantby? It's like we know. Okay, he's there. He happens to have the scientists. He must be taking all the other scientists, or he's working for somebody. Why not just take him there? I mean. I guess you can look at it. What the plot is ultimately about is just basically following Michael Caine's character and then seeing the life of a spy and then seeing what unfolds as a result. But I don't know if that's enough. I mean, I enjoyed the movie as well, but it's just kind of analyzing it, and maybe we're overthinking it, but it is a spy movie, and we're supposed the pieces should fit together. It's really not a watertight plot, but if you're into the spy genre, it's one of those. It's a good movie to watch, I think. But don't expect it to be an actioner. Don't expect it to have super great pacing. One of the reviews we saw of Ipcress File, they would call them the anti-Bond, I guess.
The anti-Bond.
Yeah, I think maybe because it's the non-romanticized version of a spy or of a British spy. So if you're interested in that, I would recommend Ipcress File. What do you think?
Definitely. Yeah, it's very down to earth.
Yeah. Well, that's our review of the Ipcress File. I hope you enjoyed this review, and thank you very much for supporting us by watching our video. And if you'd like, please subscribe. And thank you very much.